Hey, folks, ladies, gentlemen, in between sentient race cars, whatever. Those don't technically exist yet. We have returned for the Twisted Invitationals. The normal challenge series has temporarily come to a close. I'm going to explain that, why that's happened in the videos themselves. Long and short of it is, in the process of getting a gaming PC that would allow me to run Assetto Corsa. And that would allow me to mod in all kinds of different cars and tracks and greatly expand the challenge series. But for, like in between now and then, the regular challenge series, where I've done pretty much everything I could do with it without completely repeating the pattern over and over again, we're just going to stick with the Twisted Invitationals because this is less linear. It's more episodic. It's kind of like... It'd be like, the original challenge series is like Samurai Jack, where there was like an apparent end goal. And each season brought us closer to that goal. And then the final season is obviously the end of the show. The Twisted Invitationals, though, are more like a SpongeBob, where there is no clear end goal, everything is episodic, and is typically self-contained. There's no... the end goal of Samurai Jack. Get back to the past, defeat Aku, and save humanity. There isn't really one for SpongeBob. They just kind of exist. Basically, SpongeBob is just, this is something funny that happened over the course of 1 or 2 universe days. But being that the Twisted Invitationals are being moved to something of a flagship role, with the regular challenge series being temporarily gone forever. There's a better way to word it. I just don't remember what it is right now, and I honestly don't care. But the point is, it isn't happening for a while, so the Invitationals are being moved to a more flagship standing on the channel. By that I mean it's literally the only series I'm doing right now. That may change in a week and a half, but up until that point, so a week and a half, it's 2 weeks. Up until that point, the Invitationals are the only thing I'm doing, so they gotta be the biggest thing I'm doing. See the changes that are being made. Segments have been extended from 8 episodes to the previous 6. Or to 8 episodes from 6. So we've had 24 episodes in the Twisted Invitationals so far. This isn't like a reset or anything. This is still the same challenge series. It just goes by a more dramatic name. CSTI Unhinged. Challenge series, Twisted Invitationals Unhinged. It's like a sequel. It just takes what was already there and builds off of it. It makes it better. Unless your name is Sega, in which case you can't seem to flip and do that. Anyway, yeah, so each segment is now up to 8 episodes, so 25 to 32 will be segment 5. Each episode will now contain 6 events from 5, casting aside the rigid structure from before, which was always 2 short races, guest appearance, main race, demo derby. The ordering and length of these events can now be more random. Now it can be any combination of those 4 previous event types, and in just about any order. Only requirement is that a main race must take place, and no further races can happen after the main one takes place. No, that's a misstep. No further short races, or filler races, or whatever you wish to call them. Basically, there's 4 different types of events. There's the filler races, the main event race, the guest appearance, and a derby event. There's always going to be a derby event, and there's always going to be a race in the form of the main event race. Filler races are races that are shorter, and the guest race is completely separate from all of this. So there can be an episode where it could be 2 short races, the guest appearance, the derby, and then 2 main event races. But once the main event race happens, the only other kind of race that can happen is another main event race. Not even the guest appearance can happen after the main event race. The derby can happen afterwards. That's it. Includes main event episodes. Every 8th episode to end off each segment. The series returns to its more rigid roots during these episodes, where it'll be the 2 races, guest appearance, 2 derbies, and then the champions race and final demolition. Yeah, the championship events have like official names now. It's not just the race for, it's just not the championship race or the championship derby. I mean, champions race isn't all that different. But final demolition to, insinuate the fact that it's the last man standing derby, not an 8-minute death match like usual. Also, that's another thing. Deathmatch lengths can be changed. Now it can be 4 minutes, 6 minutes, 8 minutes, or 10 minutes. More frequent doubleheaders where 2 consecutive events take place at the same location, but are usually run in different modes, i.e. a main race and then a derby race at Eagles Peak Motor Park. Or it could be a short race and then the main event race at a longer layout. And then on to the drivers being changed. You can already see one of them on the screen. Segment 5 adds 4 new drivers into the fray, and they'll likely be the final driver additions. Unless this game gets more DLC that I find to be meaningful and, good. I don't think it's getting more DLC, though. Its 2nd season has ended. Maybe a tournament car comes around, but I'm not convinced that's going to happen either. Well, just address the elephant in the room. Here's the first of the 4 new drivers. They will not be appearing very often, though. They're sort of in a similar boat as Ryan Stevens and Amber Fiera, in that they are driving cars that the AI can't normally drive. So they're not going to appear very often, and unless I elect to play as them many times, or happen to run into them once or twice somehow. Because basically the only way that this car, or this car will appear in a race is through the use of the random grid option. I don't use that very often. But this is Gina Torini, who's, one of the main, I guess, founding fathers, even though it's not even a man. Founding mother? Does that make any sense? It's hard to say there's founding fathers when 3 people created the Challenge series and 2 of them are female. I am the only founding father there is. Tori and Gina were the other 2 that worked on it. That said, Hikaru Taniguchi is into sort of a co-ownership role, but that's still... He wasn't one of the original ones, that's a recent development from in between the end of Challenge Series Year 3 and this moment. Yeah, so Gina has decided she's going to enter the Invitationals finally, but there's no Mazda in sight, so she's chosen a very unusual vehicle. The Eagle R is a sports car that crosses over with a video game named Carmageddon. Just ignore the spikes, they're for show. I'm going the wrong way. The next one, Sayari Kujukawa. After she and her old school friends disbanded their literature club after one of the members turned up missing, Sayari started a personal search mission to look for her close friend from back in school. She heard about the CS, it piqued her interest, so she attended a race and saw a familiar-looking girl driving in the event. Oh be touched on later. Probably the one I actually drive as Sayari for the first time. Sawako Moriya, who knows Kogasa and Nitori personally. She typically would drive a Subaru, but there are none around. So she resorts to the closest thing to the Subaru station wagon, which is the Hammerhead. For anyone that's saying that I'm trying to say that the Subaru Legacy or Subaru Outback or Subaru Impreza wagon has anything to do in common with a Volvo station wagon, no. But do you see any Subarus on this game? As much as there definitely could be a Subaru, there's a lot of cars that I feel like could be in this game. If we're going to have like a 69 Charger or this old BMW racing or a Jeep Wrangler racing, I think we can have like a Toyota AE86, like an old Corolla of some kind, or like well, there is a Dodge Challenger, or like maybe an FB Mazda RX-7. Maybe not an FCFD because those are really valuable, but an FB, or maybe even like a Mazda Cosmo Sport. Those would be fine additions. Maybe a newer Chevy Impala, have a lowrider looking type thing. Think like Thumper from the Twisted Metal games. We have sort of that in Wingman, Barbara's vehicle, but it's still a bit bigger than the 60s and 70s Impalas were. We also kind of have that with the Gatecrasher, which is a Monte Carlo, but again, very different looks. A Dodge Neon could also work. That would fit in nicely. My mom's TV is loud. I don't know if that's picking up on the mic, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is. Yeah. We could definitely have a Subaru Outbacker if we're gonna get really daring, like a Subaru Alcyon SVX. Those things are bulky. Those things would survive 1,000 hits in a derby if you took one into it. I feel like this game just doesn't have enough Japanese cars. It's got a handful, not many, and there's a lot of clunker Japanese import cars which you could easily squeeze in here. See, and then the final vehicle, and go all the way to this end for it. Here is Sebastian Sham. He joins the Invitationals now. His father, Mortimer Sham, owns a funeral home. Seb has been allowed by his dad to borrow and repurpose one of his company's decommissioned hearses in order to enter the Invitational. So he's in a similar vein of Oscar Marquez and Charles Erickson in that regard, which is to say, a former, or like, association of like public service vehicle companies, and their vehicle in the series is a decommissioned service vehicle of that variety. So Charles Erickson's Crown Victoria taxi cab, he got fired from his taxi company he worked for. So as a bit of revenge, he basically just stole his taxi back from the company and uses it in the derbies, or uses it in the events. He what's it called, because this thing was being decommissioned anyway, he got laid off, not fired, he got laid off from his company, because otherwise the cab company couldn't afford to purchase more, cabs that weren't obsolete. Crown Victorias definitely had their moment in the sun, but they finally reached the end of their lifespan, as we're moving on to new taxi models, like Priuses or various minivans, like a Town and Country or what have you, Ford Escapes. Oscar Marquez is a retired limo driver. A few years after he'd retired, he went to one of his former employers and purchased their limo that they don't use anymore because it's an old model. So now he runs his old limo in the Invitationals. And now Sham has borrowed and modified one of his father's old decommissioned hearses from several decades ago. And that is his vehicle in the challenge series, and as you can see, it's definitely spec'd out for derbies at this rate. I've been invited to a game of Wreckfest by someone else. Kind of ironic, but also kind of can't do that at the moment because I have to record. And then there are vehicle adjustments as well. First of which on the list, Max Stanford gets an updated look to his Vandal. He's gotten rid of the rust, and he's now gone with this sort of blue flame look. A redesign for James Stillwell does away with the weird aircraft bomber look with the aggressive teeth sticker. And he's instead transitioned to a regular looking race car with a little flag on the bottom and everything else. My dad has also updated his livery. It's more simple now. It has the little flag, but it does not have, it's a different style, I guess. Madison Palmer, probably the biggest change, even though it doesn't change the colors. Obviously, none of them do. The amount of black has greatly increased on the vehicle, with this giant black flame job going on. So probably the most drastic change in car design. Shoji Hakure has simply changed the layout on his... he's basically inverted the colors, and that is it. Isabella has probably made my favorite change. Now black is the primary, and we're using a different layout now for racing stripes. And that seems to be it.